Thanks to all of you for joining us today. We're excited to have Sara Teppema join us. We're building off of the CCA's recent panel discussion on racism, which if you haven't seen, it's definitely worth your time to check out. The recording of it is on CCA's website. You can access that for free. I'm excited to talk to Sara today. Sara is very passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and there's a lot we can learn from her on this topic. So Sara, welcome. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Michael. It's great to be here.
Sara, just to kick things off, why don't you give everyone a quick introduction of yourself, what you do employment-wise, what your volunteer roles are, and we'll go from there.
Okay. So I am an independent consultant. I work in healthcare. Mostly I work in the value-based care space and working with provider organizations. I've been on my own for about a year, and before that I was at Healthcare Service Corporation, which is Blue Cross of 5 states, including Illinois and Texas. And there I also worked on value-based care programs. And then in the past, I've done lots of different things, including most of my time in consulting, a lot of time in benefits consulting. I worked for a few years at the Society of Actuaries as the staff fellow for health and the research fellow. So like I said, I've done a lot of different things in my past, but I felt like when I was at the SOA, it was interesting. I was telling health actuaries a lot about research, market research we'd done, saying we need to be helping providers learn how to take risk. And then I got an opportunity to do that. So I kind of shifted my view and working with providers and risk and population health, I would say broadly. And then as a volunteer, I'm a very active volunteer currently. I am on the board of the Society of Actuaries, and am the leader for DE&I for the SOA, so that's why we're talking today. I am also, I chaired the Research Executive Committee of the SOA, so my background is kind of in research, actuarial research. And then I also chaired a task force on public health a few years ago for the SOA, so that got me really deep into health equity, which I hope we can talk about a little bit more today. So yeah, that's what I'm currently up to, and what I'm hoping to do is spend more time in the future working on health equity, helping organizations and providers allocate resources in the best way to serve a population and make it healthier and a more equitable system for them.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. And like you mentioned, part of the impetus for our discussion today is really around your role as the committee chair for the Society of Actuaries and the Casualty Actuarial Society have a joint committee on diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DE&I, as you referenced the acronym earlier. So to start with, Sara, how did you become passionate about this topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion?
It's just something I've always been, I guess, cared about. I think you and I were talking the other day. It's sort of like, I don't know how you could not care about it right now, to be honest with you. It's a really important time for social justice and racial and ethnic equity, and we have a lot of work to do. And so I just feel like, if there's a platform in being part of the SOA board, I want to use that platform as much as I can to try to at least help within our profession, raise awareness, try to change and move the needle a little bit, and become a more representative profession. So, I've always cared about social justice issues, and this is it's just a heightened awareness, and recent events have obviously made it feel even more important than in the past.
Yeah, I mean, clearly it's a topic that's been written about for decades now at this point, but it's been brought to the forefront once again due to recent events, especially here in the U.S. And I want to go back to something you said though in your comment there. What do you see as some of the challenges with diversity within the actuarial profession?
Well, I think the biggest one that we face is, well, as everyone knows, and it's not a secret, we are not doing a great job of attracting diverse candidates into our candidate pipeline, or therefore members into our membership ranks. And I think the biggest issue that we found, and actually there was some market research that supports this from a couple years ago, is that kids of color don't know about the profession when they're in high school and even in middle school. And so what happens is they don't get set up in college, they don't start taking the exam soon enough, they don't get that internship, they don't leave university with enough exams to get hired. So if we can just raise awareness at high school level, and like I said, middle school is even becoming more and more important as kids are, especially kids in STEM, realize that this is something they're passionate about in middle school, and they start looking at careers in engineering or in math and science, and we want to make sure that they're considering actuarial science as well as those other STEM careers.
I think, in thinking about that, I think most actuaries that you talk to probably didn't come across the profession until they were maybe even in college. Every once in a while you run across somebody that knew they wanted to be an actuary, or at least had heard of the profession in high school. So what's the difference then between, say, students of color and white students in getting that message across?
Well, I think what we're finding is that the students that get hired for full-time work, or even for internships, because most full-time companies want you to have an internship, and most internships happen, sophomore, junior year of college. The kids who learned about it in high school, which are predominantly white kids, are the ones that are going to have that advantage because they're going to start taking the exams earlier in their college career, right? And so because that group is disproportionately white, the group that gets internships is disproportionately white. And so what we need to do is either, we need to raise that awareness so that, and I think actually more and more kids are learning about the profession in high school of all, races and ethnicities, and enter university knowing they want to be an actuary. And then those that don't, hopefully learn about it early on, but it needs to be early enough where they can get in that pipeline for internships and jobs. So that's just that there's a big disproportionate share that really learn about it soon enough.
Okay. Thinking through another aspect of this too, I know the Society of Actuaries recently is making a big push to get people to update some of their just own personal information in the SOA's database. I'm assuming that's coming out of a need to understand actually where we're at as a profession. We're probably have a sense that when you look at the makeup of our profession compared to the population as a whole, that there's probably disproportionate numbers, and we're not very reflective of the overall population. Anything that you could speak to on that front as far as
that's totally true. Absolutely true. I mean, we can't manage what we can't measure, right? And so if we don't know what people's genders and ethnicities are, we can't track it and see how we're doing. This is true from the exam system, but candidates are asked to provide that information. So we have pretty good data for our younger members. It's like our older members who maybe haven't been into the database in many years, where we really want to get them to populate it as well, so we can have a sense of, at all ages, how are we doing? But yeah, it's important that we get that data just so we can start to track it. And we would love to provide very transparent data to membership. And I think other organizations would like to have that data, like CCA would like to have that data too. So again, we have to track it if we want to be able to measure it. So I mentioned that the candidate pool, which reminds me of another challenge, which is exams. If we don't get, we're not getting candidates taking the exams, we won't be able to get them in as members, obviously. But the other challenge that I was reminded of is that, there's this myth that we have a meritocracy. And so it doesn't really matter what, because people take exams and that's how people become successful as an actuary. And so it doesn't really matter what their ethnicity is, and we don't need to track that. And I would say that that's a myth, and it's not really true. We have a lot of evidence to show that just because, first of all, we have a hard enough time attracting people into the pipeline to begin with. So that's that awareness issue. But even members who do pass the exams, we know that there is plenty of workplace bias, and there's plenty of issues in people becoming successful overall as actuaries. The exams is one thing, but career success is a separate issue. And so we want to try to help our members to overcome that, either members of color who need to overcome those biases in the workplace, or their white peers who need to learn how to overcome their biases and and help their colleagues of color become successful.
Awesome, thank you.